Gianna, Lana Convincing Crypto, where we keep you in the loop on all the latest trends and news on crypto and blockchain technology. Together, we're building a crypto movement that fights for climate justice and economic empowerment. We have a very special guest on our show today, Maxwell Flitton. He's a software engineer based in London. Maxwell has been in the tech space for a while. He's been part of multiple startups, one particularly in AI, and he wrote 2 textbooks on Rust programming. So he's very experienced in the space, and he wants to share some of his insights today. So before we start, Maxwell, I want to ask you one question that we ask all of our guests. The question is, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word crypto, and why?
I would say when I hear the word crypto, I'd say exposure. That's kind of because there's a lot of like things happening in technology. You know, there's a lot of battles, there's a lot of database battles and that sort of thing, and where the future of database storages or front-end frameworks or programming languages are happening. But really, when I say the word exposure, it's because the average person on the street is now getting exposed to it through crypto. Like this is just another kind of like power dynamic that's going on in technology, but people are kind of getting a front seat to it, when usually it kind of happens in the background and no one notices really what's happening. So I think that's it really.
Nice. Yeah, just this past year, it seems like so many more people have been exposed to crypto. Before, you weren't hearing people, just people you don't know, just like eavesdropping, like, oh, crypto. And now I'm in New York City, and now I'm seeing all these ads about crypto too. And that wasn't the case before, just a year and a half ago. So the next question I want to ask is, what's your story? How did you get in the tech space, and how did you get into blockchain?
Well, I was originally a nurse. So in the UK, we have a National Health Service. So it's kind of like a bit like the military, but slightly different. Where doctors are called house officers and started by the government. So I kind of went there and I started working in accident emergency in London. And I came across a patient that was having a heart attack, but it's never as you know, kind of like glamorous as it sounds. He was just waiting for bloods, you know, and he was marking these papers. And I said, what is that? Because it looked like magic. And he's like, oh, I'm a physics professor. And he said, you know, you should really come by my lab and you can see physics. If he was obviously very passionate about it. So on a day off, I kind of went to Queen Mary University and had a look around the lab, and I was kind of really excited. So I enrolled in a second undergraduate degree in physics, and then finished that, and then went to UCL and kind of did physics and engineering in medicine. But in the UK, even though we have a National Health Service, the innovation in the UK for medicine is quite lacking in funding because it's a government institution. So when I graduated, you kind of looked at like where the money was, where the innovation was happening. It's kind of all happening in software. So I just ended up in software, initially financial tech, because London is just one of the major finance, you know, centers of the world. And then that's how I got experience in financial tech. And I kind of built an open source kind of like a machine learning package. And then I got accepted into Monolith AI, and then that was the first startup that was kind of successful. And long story short, there's a load of other things that are happening, and now I work for an open source foundation that kind of calculates risk of financial disasters, that sort of thing. So that's the story.
That's your story. So you basically made a whole career change.
Yes, yeah, it was good fun. One of my business partners, she was also a medical doctor, and she kind of we did some teaching at Imperial College London, and she taught herself programming, and now she's doing the COVID data processing at Oxford University. But we still work on side projects together, etc. So yeah, it's an exciting field. I think with software you get a lot of there is some math, there is some physics, that sort of things quite fun, but you do appreciate like cognitive diversity, and they add different perspectives to solutions.
So I know you mentioned in your email that you're doing some work with smart contracts. I want to know, how are smart contracts right now being used to change the way we handle data? And then if you want to share a little bit, if you're allowed to, what you're developing right now.
Okay, yeah. So Smart contracts are quite revolutionary in one way, but also not very revolutionary in another. And that's because, they're obviously very expensive to make a transaction on a smart contract. But it's essentially code that kind of executes if certain conditions happen. And there's a really good example. So they're really good at like breaking down the need for trust. And I think most of your viewers would have known about trust in crypto. So a classic example would be, let's say, insurance. So if we look at something like a Polynesian farmer or something, or in East Asia, getting insurance is really hard because actually carrying out inspections and all this sort of stuff is actually, very costly. So what the insurance industry has done is that they've come up with this idea of parametric insurance, which is not as good as real insurance, but it's better than nothing. And what happens there is that, let's say rainfall is your biggest killer for crops. So you can take out an insurance policy on rainfall. So if the rainfall goes over an X amount in a year, you get a payout. If it doesn't, then you don't. So that doesn't protect you against your crop against everything. To protect your crop against everything, you need to send someone out to investigate claims, which obviously for third world countries and stuff like this is just not really that practical. So there's a few big players in insurance, and they're there because you have the trust. So let's say me and you, we wanted to insure a Polynesian farmer. We definitely could, because the conversion ratio of our personal wealth is quite big compared to his. So we could most probably have the money to cover his crop for rainfall. But if he wants to enter a business deal with us, there's a lot of power dynamics that he just wouldn't really like, because we're on the other side of the world and he doesn't have the financial resources to chase us if we don't pay him. So we could take the premium from him, but then there's nothing stopping us from just not paying him, because the chances of him chasing us and getting a lawyer and going over the world and taking us to court in a small claims court is just not going to happen. So he's kind of forced to go through a main, middleman. So let's say if we use a Solana smart contract, what we can do is we can create this smart contract in Rust. He puts in his premium, we put in the amount of money that we have to do to insure his crop. And then we use Chainlink. I don't know, have you heard of Chainlink, or have you covered Chainlink before?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't covered it before on the show.
So Chainlink's like an Oracle kind of coin, and we would use that in combination with Solana, and Chainlink would then check the rainfall with various data sources. That's why it's called an Oracle. It checks multiple data sources. And we could use the Chainlink to check up on the rain coverage. And if the rainfall goes over a certain amount, the smart contract would instantly execute and he would get the payout. So he doesn't actually need to trust us anymore. We can enter this conversation, we can enter this business deal, and he can sleep well at night. Even if we ring him up every day and say, look, I really don't want to pay you, he doesn't have to lose a moment of sleep, because he knows it's locked up in the Solana blockchain and there's nothing that we can do about it as soon as that code kind of executes. So that's where smart contracts really kind of revolutionize the world in that sense. It kind of breaks down the need for the intermediary.
Mm-hmm. You don't need that middleman, and like the blockchain does not lie. So if you
have
the code will do what the code's supposed to do, and you don't have to worry about people doing the wrong thing and not keeping their word.
Exactly. Yeah.
And are you allowed to share specifically a little bit about your project, or was that a theoretical with the Solana blockchain that you were talking about?
Well, sadly, yeah. So the person I was working with recently, he's going through investment rounds and stuff. So I would breach contracts if I actually gave the specifics about him. But I mean, I can say on a high level, financiers and so on, they are actually very keen in certain aspects of using, blockchains and smart contracts especially. So there is a bit of a divide though in what you can see. So if you go online, you can see all sorts of crypto enthusiasts. And if you go behind closed doors of financiers, they're also enthusiastic about cryptocurrency, but it's from a different angle. And I think some of it is that some of the people online are a bit naive. They think cryptocurrency is going to change everything. Nothing will change everything. We also had that when we were in machine learning. We had people come to us and ask us if we could predict the stock market. And I was like, well, if I could do that, I'd be way richer than I am now. And, you wouldn't be able to talk to me. But so it's the same with this. AI has done amazing things, but it's not going to solve everything. And it's the same with crypto. There's some very good use cases, but there's some other things that, obviously you look at it and you think, oh, this is going to flop, badly.
So we don't give any financial advice on the show, but I'm really curious
yes.
your opinion on how do you know, or how do you think projects are going to be successful, and what's your opinion on the projects that won't be successful, and what are the determinants for that?
Okay, yeah. So I have a few general rules. Now, I obviously can't predict every single thing. Like, again, I'd be the next Warren Buffett if I could. And sometimes things are successful and it's illogical and I just didn't work it out. But for me, generally, I know that the cryptocurrencies really, like blockchain is a database. There's different types of databases. There's in-memory databases, there's SQL databases, there's no SQL databases, and there's blockchain. What blockchain essentially does is that it solves data races. So to listeners who are interested in this, a data race is kind of like a good example of this is, let's say if we have a digital ticket to a stadium, a football stadium, whatever, somebody very devious can copy and paste that digital ticket and sell it to two people. So they both got the barcode on, and the data race is essentially, there's two people heading to the stadium. Whichever one gets there first will have their ticket scanned and let in. The second one won't. So blockchain kind of solves the double spend problem. So things like digital tickets on NFTs, that's amazing, because that means that you can just exchange tickets on the street with somebody and they know for sure that you haven't duplicated it and sent it elsewhere.
Yeah, concerts.
Another thing is the locking up of funds. Sorry?
They've been doing that for concerts now. I think there was a concert in, I want to say Croatia, which was one of the first to be a large festival that had NFT tickets.
That's amazing. Yeah, this is like a really good use. Yeah, and you could also see this with like education credentials or something like this, right? So, and that's where the trade-off is. And I have to keep telling people when they try to, invest in VR and stuff, that tech doesn't defy the laws of economics. Technology solves a problem, but sometimes the cost is so big it's not worth the problem you're solving. But if we look at something like, I've been talking to another group on medical implants. And this is actually very green, even if you use the Ethereum blockchain, because in my times in clinical practice, let's say if someone has a pacemaker and they have like an irregular heartbeat and they have to go into hospital, and we have to do an X-ray to see what type of pacemaker it is. Whereas if they had a record on the blockchain of what type of pacemaker it is, we could definitely authenticate that it's from it was installed at this time by a hospital, we don't have to do the X-ray. Now, if we think about it, the X-ray is very energy intensive. You have to expose someone to radiation. It's really not a good trade-off. Whereas a database lookup on a blockchain, even though it's more expensive and not, it's not very energy efficient compared to another database lookup, it saves an X-ray. That's actually very green. It's actually very good for the environment. So it's all relative in that sense. So the double spend, anything that solves a double spend problem has good potential. Another really good potential is the smart contracts, where you can hold assets from two parties. And then that gets rid of the need for trust. So that's another really good one. Other stuff where people just say you use it to transact value or something, and they can't really give you any clear thing. I'm a bit more hesitant about it, and I think maybe you're just trying to fit blockchain into it, and I don't know if it really solved the problem. And another one is I don't fully know these DAOs, so you have to take my comments here with a bit of pinch of salt, but it depends what you're voting on. There's like so I've done business deals and I've worked in companies and startups. I would hate anonymous token holders, whoever owns the most amount of tokens, to actually be voting on how my business runs. That just sounds like a disaster. But now there may be other reasons that DAOs could be useful, right?
Yeah, you yes, the DAO and their governance.
But that's So you got to
it could be people who own more tokens have more votes, but they could write it in a way that it doesn't matter how many tokens you have, you only have a certain amount of voting power per person per wallet. But yeah, I think it depends on the governance of the actual token itself.
Okay, that's a good. Yeah, I mean, we have to take my comments with the DAOs with a bit of pinch of salt because I've never seen them run in. Yeah, I've never really experienced those. But you have to be careful. Like, yeah, just DAOing everything or something like that, I guess, wouldn't be. It's not useful for everything, but I'm sure there's some good uses there. But that's it. Yeah, to take home, it's double spend probbing and the holding of assets. Those are pretty good use cases. There may be other good use cases. I don't know everything about everything, but that's personally where I start to filter it by.
That makes sense. The practical use cases where you're doing something that the current systems currently need to be upgraded. And you're a developer, so I want to ask you, with all these different projects, where does developer satisfaction come into play here? Does developer satisfaction have any role in whether the project will be a good project or whether they'll fail in the future?
Sadly, yes. Yes. It's sad and good, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So people who are not in technology, and this is why I talk about like I think crypto is kind of more of an exposure thing, because some people have never seen technology behind the scenes evolve. Technology can sometimes win or lose for the most weirdest problems or like reasons. So anyone who has written software, they'll be familiar that every 2 years there's a new programming language that's coming out and it's going to kill another programming language. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really amount to anything. And when you pick a programming language, if you go on the internet, there's loads of new developers who are just trying to assert some sort of authority and trying to make a name for themselves. And they're a bit naive, and they'll say stuff like, oh, this programming language is X amount times faster than the other programming language, it's going to kill it. When in fact, when you're trying to build a company, you don't want to use just the fastest one, because let's say there's no developers who code in that language, and then one of your developers leaves or gets hit by a bus or something, you need to recruit again, Yeah. And then there's this trade-off of like, how fast is the program compared to how the programming language compared to how fast it takes to code something. So if you have to develop features really quickly, then you can maybe take a trade-off on computing power. So it's all quite unique, and you'll see some terrible programming language. So if you Google, anyone who's interested, you can Google like JavaScript memes. And JavaScript is one of the nastiest languages, and everyone loves to hate on it. But it's one of the only languages that runs in the browser. So it's the most popular programming language, even though if you Google, why does everyone hate JavaScript? There'll be loads of reasons why, but it's the only one that runs in the browser, right? So it brings execution to the phone or the laptop actually accessing the website runs the JavaScript itself as opposed to your server. That's a great saving in cost. But you'll also get it where sometimes the developer experience is just so bad that people just will choose not to develop in it. I'm a big fan of Rust, but the first couple of years they kept making breaking changes. And that's why it didn't really pick up in popularity initially, because people learned it one way and then it broke, and then they released a new release and it was all very different, and why do you want to relearn it like 3 or 4 times? It's the same with front-end frameworks. Like we see React, which is a front-end web framework. Facebook pushed it out. Initially, Google pushed out Angular. Everyone's like, Angular is the future. And then Facebook kind of released React, and now it's the dominant one, and Angular is pretty much dead. So sometimes these play off, sometimes these don't. And it's quite fascinating. It's a bit random. So I find it quite fascinating when you see people who haven't seen this before, because crypto is just kind of exposing a load of new people, and they obsess over the fact that a certain coin has a slightly faster transaction speed, and it's like, well, this doesn't really mean anything, which is, so if we look at like a really good one is Ethereum. People say, oh, it's very expensive, and that's true, but if the transactions you're executing on these smart contracts are something like a resolution of an insurance claim, this can be slow and expensive. I don't mind, because what it's processing is quite a big chunk of, like whether my premium comes back to me with the payoff or not, that's huge. I don't mind paying a gas fee on that. I'd happily pay a gas fee if the programming language Solidity is stable and the network is stable. I'd prefer that than a faster coin that's unstable. You know what I'm saying? It's so it's a very like it's a lot of trade-offs. So so that's why, like, I mean, personally, I'll do a declaration, because I don't want people to think that I'm hiding anything. And again, this is not like this is not this is not financial advice. This is just what I'm doing. I hold Ethereum mainly for that reason, because it seems to be the most stable, mature. There's textbooks now written in Solidity and Ethereum, and something like, let's say, Solana. I'm a big fan of that because the Rust programming language is a very hard language, and Solana have openly said that they're going to use Rust as a programming language to keep bad developers out, so the quality of their programs are going to be better. So there is this kind of weird tussle of, some of these projects, they want to have good quality control. Others just want to grow as quickly as they can. Usually the ones that want to grow as quickly as they can don't fare as well, as a result. It's to make it an example outside of crypto, and I sent you this over email, is one of my friends, he's very pro Android. He loves Android. He hates Apple. And when he wrote his app, he wrote it for Android and Apple. And when I met up with him recently, he says, "Oh, I've discontinued my Android and I continue supporting the iOS." And I was like, "Why is this happening?" And he said, "Well, the Android users just wanted everything for free and complained all the time, whereas the Apple users were willing to pay for the app." So you also get that as well. Like, how is the community? So there are some people, I don't want to name names in terms of the crypto community, but I know some developers, some of them have made it public, where they've actively left developing a certain crypto community because the community is just wanting to get rich quick, or they're constantly giving them grief, and there's a lot of toxicity and scams going on in that area. And these developers are human at the end of the day, and they don't want to hate their job, and they eventually leave. So there's all these different sorts of mechanisms, and I would advise people who are interested in cryptocurrency, who maybe would put some money into it and so on, is not to obsess over one metric, or there's a partnership that's announced that doesn't really mean much. It's really, you look at, like, a really good way is looking at how many jobs are being posted, what are the educational materials. If there's textbooks in the space, that's usually a good sign that the technology is more secure. So Rust is a very new language, and we had to wait a couple of years before I was commissioned by PacT to actually write a textbook in it, because these publishers, they don't want to produce a textbook and dedicate time with editors and all this sort of stuff if there's no developers using it. It's so it's that sort of thing. I think very boring, sadly. Not
But it's the research behind it, it's people behind it, essentially. And if you don't have the people, you don't have a blockchain at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the thing with managers. They come across with very mundane management concerns. Can I replace my developer if he leaves? Like, so the most cutting edge, like most unstable coin that's going to revolutionize crypto, or he's like, I'll pay extra gas fees, and if this developer leaves, oh, it's Ethereum and Solidity, there's loads of developers and textbooks on this, I can actually find other developers. This is sadly what kind of forges ahead with tech, really.
In your opinion, how do we move the blockchain space, the crypto space, in the right direction, that the projects that have actual utility are the ones that actually grow? Or do you think that's just what's naturally going to happen? Or is there anything that our community can do to support that?
Yeah, I guess maybe just coming up with not mantras, but some sort of framework into really thinking how does something add value? Is it worth paying it? And a good example, somebody contacted me and they were obsessed with VR, and they said everything, you know, they wanted to do VR for everything, and VR is very expensive. And you've got to think, would you pay for it? That's the big thing. So his company flopped, and but he didn't listen. And I said he wanted to recruit for hospitals, and he's like, oh, we can use VR, so the person who's applying for the job can walk around the hospital. And I said, well, that sounds good. And if you poll people and say, do you want to do that? They go, yeah, it sounds kind of cool. But then if you said to them, do you want to pay the prices of running those servers so you can look around a hospital? They'd be like, no, just send me some pictures. I'm not going to pay for that.
Yeah.
That's the
Cool,
that's
but
the
like
thing
what
with
value
it.
is that adding to the whole experience here?
Yeah. So I guess you put yourself in the customer's shoes in that sense, where would you pay an expensive gas fee to have a smart contract evaluated? Well, lawyers cost a lot of money, you know, and you have to wait around and you have to do a bank transfer and stuff like this. When I bought my first flat, lawyer held the deposit. You know, I had to pay him a lot of money to do that, and then you know what I'm saying. So it's like a gas fee. That's a bargain. Would I pay a gas fee to make a transaction in a game? Probably not. Right. It's a different kind of thing there. So I guess that's a really safe way. If you can say, would you pay for the gas fee for you know, a value transaction? You definitely would, and it still seems like a bargain. Then for sure, that's got a lot more legs. And I guess as well, we just need. This sounds a bit horrible. You know, I'm holding cryptocurrency, so I don't mean ill will to cryptocurrency investors. I'll also feel the pain, but I think sadly we need just another massive crash just to weed out some of these kind of hype. Because when you have a crash, this is why they call it a correction. It kind of kills some of the weaker ones that just aren't going to hold up, and it kind of clears the air a bit, and kind of people who are just in it for the hype kind of leave because, you know, they don't truly believe it. And then you know, if you hold for the long run, I guess it's you know, then the good ones come out. A good example is the 2000 crash for the .com, where, you know, there was all sorts of crazy kind of like companies. There was pets.com, and someone's the most famous one. And you know, I read Peter Thiel's book on 0 to 1, and he co-founded PayPal and all this, and, you know, and he was saying that he was in Silicon Valley at the time, and it wasn't considered weird for one person to have free startups, to found free startups at the same time, you know. And this was obviously a bubble and etc. But the internet bubble after that was the future, right? The Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, and so on came out of it. And so it's there are some good gems holding here, but we just need to get rid of the pet.coms and that sort of thing.
We'll wrap up soon. I want to ask, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Maybe either people who are developers or people who want to maybe pursue a career path that you've pursued. What advice or what extra info do you want to share with us today?
I would say, yeah, if you want to pursue a career in this, for sure, I'd highly recommend it. People often talk about diversity. You know, you hear about all this buzzword kind of diversity, but there is some truth behind it, and it's cognitive diversity. So I find the most successful tech teams that I've seen, people who come from all different walks. So, you know, one of the front end developers I've worked with had a history degree and so on. And there are some maths, physics, engineering graduates as well, of course, but it's, you see the world in a different light, you know, and I really enjoy that. And the research shows that if you have a diverse team, a cognitively diverse team, even from different countries, then you fare much better, you know. That so they show that immigrants and so on who go to another country, they kind of are very successful in startups, and it's because they're looking at the system that kind of governs society in a completely new light. Whereas kind of if you've grown up in that system, you don't really question it. So yeah, if someone wants to go into that field, 100%, I'd suggest that they kind of learn some stuff online, and they focus on the problem they want to solve. Understanding the problem they want to solve is most probably the biggest thing, because code is just syntax. It's just a logical way of solving that problem. So some part of coding is harder than others. There's different, you know, levels of programming languages. So there's really low ones that, you have to do a lot of maths and stuff like this and really push the boundaries in that field. There's some high level programming languages like Solidity in Ethereum is very high level. You don't have to know anything about computers. You have to know about and you don't have to know any math. It's more about the solution that you're trying to solve. So I guess you just read around and you play with a few different languages. There's some online tutorials, but focus on a field that you really want to solve problems in. I think that is definitely a great way. Also, producing, and sorry, I'm looping back a bit now. Producing a coin nowadays is actually very easy. There's like GUIs online, and you pay a bit of money and you type in your market cap and all this sort of stuff, and it will create a coin for you. So I guess be very skeptical of just new coins constantly coming out, because anyone can create them now. But on the flip side, that if you do really know a way in which a token can actually solve a problem, then the barrier to entry for you now is much easier. So that's also quite exciting. And the initial startup costs and the initial way to actually test to see if that solution will work is also, much lower now, which is also quite exciting. So there's a trade-off there. It means you get more scammers, but it also is a bit more egalitarian, where if you genuinely want to solve a problem, you have a better shot at it. You don't have to have a load of PhDs trying to code the blockchain from scratch. These blockchains are already well established now.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of your insights, Maxwell. I'm just excited to see where the blockchain space continues to move forward, more people who continue to be exposed to it, and what the future holds. Who's back? All right.
I can wave.
Feel free to subscribe, and comment your thoughts. I can have your info up online too, Maxwell, if people want to contact you too. And yeah, we'll see you next time, everyone. Bye.